Think you can hear me from there? All right. First of all, thank you all for joining us. And I want to talk about something today that I think is going to help us sell cars. I think everybody here would agree that we sell a quality product. Does everybody agree with that? Both of them are products? Okay. Well, when you hear the word quality, what do you think?
Subaru. Volkswagen.
What else? What's associated with quality?
Reliability,
Safety.
resale value, dependability, resale value, build quality.
Build quality. Okay. I'm glad you said that because that's where I was going. That's one of the things. All of those things that you guys mentioned are part of quality, but they're kind of intangible. It's kind of hard to show someone a car and show them the durability of it or the long-term longevity of it or the reliability. But you can talk about and demonstrate build quality. Build quality is something I think Volkswagen really excels in. And so I want to kind of do a quick little demonstration to tell you, how you can demonstrate it and also what goes into it. Now I picked this car. I'm not trying to pick on Subaru or anything, but I just noticed this the other day when I went on a test drive with somebody. This is something that you can demonstrate with a customer. When you shut this door, tell me what you hear.
Hollow.
It's hollow. What does it sound like? Does that sound strong?
Like a flat basketball.
Like a what?
A flat basketball.
A flat basketball. Okay, flat basketball, tin door or tin can. It doesn't really inspire you. It doesn't give you a lot of confidence when you hear that. On the other hand, if you go to a Volkswagen, and this is something that Volkswagen really actually concentrates on, and you open and shut this door, what does that sound?
More solid.
So, if you go to YouTube and you see, if you go to some car show videos, you'll see Volkswagen executives going around to different products that other companies are coming out with, and you'll see the president of Volkswagen come up to their door and go and make a face like that and walk away, because they concentrate on that. So what makes it sound like that? Why do you think this car sounds like it does and that one
More
doesn't?
insulation. More steel.
More steel. The biggest difference is that Volkswagen uses a lot of ultra high strength and high strength steel in their cars. The competitors tend to use a little bit less steel. The advantage for the competitor is the vehicle's a little bit lighter and the fuel economy is a little bit better. But the advantage for the Volkswagen is you have a sturdier vehicle, it performs better in a crash, and it's going to last a long time. So when you say steel, it's not, and they use virgin steel too, which doesn't really affect the way it sounds. It's a funny expression, but they don't use recycled steel, and that's to avoid corrosion and rust. But one thing that's unique about the way Volkswagen makes its panels, every automobile is made out of panels. There's a panel here, panel here, panel here, panel here. And the way they create these is they take a piece of sheet steel, and I have a little piece of paper here to sort of stand in for a piece of sheet steel. They take this piece of sheet steel and they have a die that's shaped like the thing that they're trying to stamp out, and then a big press that comes down on top of it, and under heat and pressure it forms the shape of whatever it is they're trying to shape. So I brought two plates from my house. Please don't laugh at my plates. They're the only thing I could think of. Imagine that you're trying to create this shape on a large scale. So here's a door. Here's a piece of sheet steel that's supposed to represent a door. You take your die and you put your piece of fresh steel on top of that, and then you take the press and it comes down and you stamp that together. It's called stamping, and hopefully it comes out in the shape of a door. Okay, that doesn't look like a door, but use your imagination. But it'll come out with these creases, this curvature down here, and that kind of thing. Now the problem with, and that's the way most manufacturers do it. The problem with that, let me put the plates away, is that's only one sheet of steel, which is pretty flexible. You know, if that's all you did with the door, it would be kind of weak. So there's two ways, or basically three ways to overcome that. One is to brace it with like beams or supports on the back of the door, which adds weight. The other is to use more steel, or a thicker piece of sheet steel. So imagine if you took a thicker piece of steel and you put that in the die and stamped it, you'd have a lot stronger door, but you'd also have a much heavier door. You don't want the weight, but you want the strength. So what does Volkswagen do? Volkswagen uses what they call custom rolled blanks. So instead of it being just a flat piece of sheet steel, that piece of steel is rolled to be thicker in certain spots of the door and thinner in other places. So that when they stamp it together, it's strong where it needs to be strong, and it's light where it needs to be light. So if you look at a Volkswagen door, and this is something probably your customer never does and you've probably never done it. This is actually one solid piece of steel with a skin on it, and that's designed to be removed in case of an accident. They can replace it with another panel that's not deformed. But this is basically one unit. And I want you guys to come over here and look at this.
Sorry.
If you'll notice, there are no seams or joints or welds on this entire piece of steel. That's one solid piece of steel that's been formed like this. And it's formed to be thicker and thinner in certain areas because it's a custom rolled blank. Now in between that piece of steel and this piece of steel, there's another piece of steel that looks kind of like corrugated cardboard that goes from up here down to here, and that helps protect against side impact. Now if you go over here, sorry to make you move, just like Jeff was doing, you can show this. Tell your customer to look for this on a competitor's car. This is a piece of steel. There's a weld. There's another weld. And here's another weld.
There's another weld by the door too.
Right here, yeah. So you've got 1, 2, 3, at least 3 pieces of steel here. If you have an accident that's really serious enough, where do you think it's going to collapse or break?
On the sill.
On the welds, exactly. And if you looked at the steel and you cut it open, it's probably going to be one thickness. And it may not have a cross member. Probably
There is a cross member within the door. It's a V shape, and it's designed to dissipate the impact through the car, not through the passengers.
Right.
You also have a solid steel frame that's in the B pillar that's wrapped by sheets of steel. So whenever there's an accident and the jaws of life are called into play, they instruct the fire departments to cut the roof off and not to go through the pillars, because all it does is it makes those sheets of steel into a bigger solid steel post, which is in the middle, which is why Subaru has all the commercials where they live. Catastrophic accidents keep the accident damage on the outside, unlike the Europeans, where there's a good chance you're probably going to be injured in those type of accidents. But with the Subaru, because of the way everything is designed, it dissipates all the energy of the accident through the frame of the car, not through the passengers.
All right, thank you for the Subaru presentation. That's good information, and it's all correct. But a lot of what he said is also true of the Volkswagen. So going back over here to the side, another thing that you will notice is the hinges. Now, in a lot of the competitors' vehicles, the hinges that are used to hold the door in place are basically cold rolled steel. They're pieces of flat steel that are pressed out, and they're just little flat, kind of cheesy looking hinges. If you look at these are cast. They're forged under heat, so they're very heavy duty. They're very strong. Somebody like Adam can actually sit on the door and it won't break off. I sold a guy a car this week, and he was telling me about his new Jeep Grand Cherokee that he bought in the 90s. And he said after he'd had it about 3 years, he went to open the door one day and the door actually fell off. Now you don't encounter that very often, but that can happen. It used to happen a lot more until they started putting more care and quality into the vehicle. You also have in the side of this vehicle a great big bulky B pillar. This is called an A pillar. This is the B pillar. This is the C pillar. And Volkswagen's approach is a little different. Instead of using the kind of the rings of the onion, which Subaru uses, which is a great engineering feat, they use basically big, massive pieces of steel that get wider down where your hip is. So, as Mark was saying, when you get hit in the side, this is going to absorb a lot of the impact. You can also take your fist in almost every Volkswagen and put it in here between the seat and the side of the door. You can fit your fist in there, and that in some cars your door is right up against the side of the seat. So that means if you get hit, the energy of that impact is going to get transmitted right into you, into your elbow, your side, your ribs. You're going to have an injury. Finally, because I know we can't do this forever, as much fun as it is, the welds. Most cars are held together with welding. There's a lot of different types of welds. The most common weld that you'll find in an automobile is a spot weld. I've tried to find some spot welds in this car, but it's kind of hard because Volkswagen is getting away from that. But I did find some in the trunk. And if you know what to look for, they're pretty easy to spot, but they're getting harder and harder. There's a little, looks like a little round, a little circular thing, almost like a nail head right here. And there's one over here, one over here. They used to use them in here, but they're getting away from it. But if you look around most cars, you're going to see a lot of spot welds, especially when you open the trunk or open the doors. Now the spot weld, all they do is they take two pieces of steel, they put them together, and there's a little welder that comes down and creates a spot where it melts it together and it holds it in place. It's sort of like the buttons in a shirt. So when you button up your shirt, it keeps that shirt together. Volkswagen prefers to use laser welding, or laser brazing they call it. And the primary place you can see it is up here on the roof. This is a separate piece of steel, this is a separate piece of steel. They're joined together with a laser weld. If you take your finger, and sometimes I ask my customer to do that, just run your finger along that crease or that point where they join. It's very, very smooth. Now in some cars, like that Camry out there, you'll see a black strip of rubber going down the roof. And the purpose of that is not decorative. The purpose of that is to conceal the spot welds, because they're using spot welds up here. And it's very hard to make that look good. You got to sand it, you got to paint it differently. It mars the appearance. Why is this important to you? If you get hit in the side, again, if the car's going to split, it's going to split at the weakest points. So with this continuous weld, and with a laser weld, it actually, instead of like just laying steel on top of steel and heating it up and bonding it together, it actually changes it in the molecular level, and it bonds together at a molecular level. So it's much, much stronger. So that's some of why this car shuts like that. Anybody? Questions? You don't have to.
That was good.
Good job, though. Yeah, it's good.